So we're making ghee. I've got 4 sticks of butter in my favorite ghee pan, and this pour spout really helps, I find. So if you have one like this, I really recommend using that. And then the other thing that you're going to need is some cheesecloth, and I have this very small strainer. It fits kind of perfectly in the jar that I'm going to strain the ghee into. And so for that size strainer, all you need is a little piece of cheesecloth. This is just basically just 2 layers, and that will work fine. But obviously if you have a larger strainer, you're going to want to use a larger piece of cheesecloth. So we're going to melt this butter and bring it to a boil. So we'll check back in with that when that starts to boil. So you can see it's just about to boil. It's starting to foam up, or it's foamed up quite a bit actually. And it's just about to boil, and I've got the heat at medium-high, and I'm going to want to turn it down, otherwise it's going to boil over the top of the pan. But I don't want to go too low, so I'm going to go to about medium and just try to get it to a point where it's going to keep boiling and the moisture can boil off, but it's not going to boil over. And if I want, I can stir it, and that'll also prevent the boil over from happening. But once the butter melts, stirring really isn't that necessary. So we're just going to give this a few minutes to boil, for all the moisture to boil off, and then we'll check back in with it. So I'm looking at it, and I can start to see the milk solids separating. So I push away some of this foam, and you can kind of see how there's sort of milk solids floating in the butter oil that will eventually become the ghee that's separating. So we're going to let that go a little bit longer, and we'll check back in. So you can tell by the color here that it's starting to brown. You can see around the sides of the pan it's getting brown and more of a golden color in the middle. So it's almost done, and we'll check back in when it is. So if you push aside the foam on top, you can see that, you know, it's oil. It's a little hard because this foam is kind of persistent. Sometimes that happens. But I can see, if I have a moment, I can look through and I can see the milk solids at the bottom. And I can also see that golden color, and you can see how it's starting to leave some brown residue on this spatula. So I'm going to turn it off the heat and let it cool a little. I just find that helps the foam kind of settle, and also when I strain it, you'll see why I like to have it a little bit cooler than it is at this stage. So we'll check back in with that in a few minutes to strain it. So you can see now the foam settled, so I pushed away the foam, and you can see the milk solids that have sort of browned a little bit on the bottom. And it looks a little darker than it's going to look once it's strained, but that's basically what you want it to look like. And then I'm going to strain it into this jar. I'm just going to add it to the ghee that's left in the jar. And I just don't want to pour it through so fast that it overwhelms the cheesecloth, so that these layers of cheesecloth, it's just the 2 layers that I put in there, have a chance to catch anything that I don't want to go into the ghee. And so the whole thing, cooking it from the cold sticks of butter to this phase, took about 15 minutes. So there's our finished jar of ghee. There was a little bit extra, so I put it in the ramekin there. And usually it'll firm up at room temperature. Not always. Sometimes it still stays kind of liquid. Depends on the butter and the time of year. But all in all, it took about 15 minutes to make, and assuming I've made it properly, got all the moisture and the milk solids out, then it should last for basically indefinitely without having to be in the refrigerator. And it's great to cook with. Ghee has a really high smoke point, so you can use it for frying, you can use it for just about anything.